Hello and welcome to Streams, brought to you by Good News Broadcasting. This is the podcast where we review and critique popular TV shows and movies on our streaming platforms and explore their themes to see how they may align or conflict with scripture so you can watch with wisdom. My name is Eamon and today, as per usual, I'm joined by Tom. What's the crack? What's happening?
Big
The terrible impressions continue. We are looking at Frankenstein, which is the new film that is on Netflix. It's the number one film in the world at the moment. It was released in October 2025, so it is quite fresh. And it's directed by a guy called Guillermo del Toro. He's a creepy guy who loves a creepy film with creepy creatures.
That was good, that. Very good.
Thank you, yeah. He's done Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah,
which
I did watch that once upon a time.
Creepy film. He's done Shape of Water.
It's one of those films you're meant to have watched because it was kind of Oscar worthy. I remember it coming out and thinking I should watch that. I remember seeing the trailer and it looked like a woman falls in love with like a big fish.
Yep. So big no from me. And then Hellboy, which is right up my street.
It's so naff, Hellboy. If you've ever seen any kind of trailer, I just can't watch that.
It's good. It's enjoyable.
Very Marvel-esque, isn't it, Frankenstein?
I'm not even going to rise to that because I'm pretty sure you tried to throw this in every single streams that something is like Marvel or Marvel's rubbish.
I can guarantee you nobody listening to this podcast thinks Marvel is good.
Right,
because we have very cultured and very intelligent listeners. And so if we just said, oh yeah, next time we're going to do Marvel, they just wouldn't listen. So.
Right, okay. If you're a punter and you're listening to this, just put in a comment, send us an email, give me a call, whatever it is, and just tell me that you like Marvel just to prove him wrong.
And I'm willing to put a breakfast on the fact that you won't get that,
okay.
So I'll be right.
There you go. He's spoken. So please, if you like Marvel, just let us know so I can get a free cooked breakfast. But anyway, this is a real passion project for the director. He loves a creepy film with a creepy monster in it, but he really loves Frankenstein. I saw an interview online where he basically said that he's been wanting to make this film for like 20 years and that in his home, he has a room within his library called like the Frankenstein room or something like that because he just really loves the original book that was released in the early 1800s. And so it's a real passion project for him. And it's been received quite well. People seem to quite like it, to be honest. And it stars a bunch of noticeable people. Oscar Isaac, he's been in Star Wars, Ex Machina, a bunch of other stuff as well. Christoph Waltz, he's a good guy, good actor.
Not even Christopher Waltz could save this film.
Who's Christopher Waltz?
Chris Waltz. Why would you call him?
His name is Christoph.
Okay.
He's German. Not Christopher.
I'm anglicising it. That's all right.
Oh, wow. But he's well known for Django Unchained, which is obviously a class film. And he's also a Bond villain.
I think he's an excellent actor.
And the monster is played by Jacob Elordi, which is interesting because I know who he is. I've seen him out and about, you know, kind of he's like Hollywood's big hot shot. But this is the first film I've ever seen him in. I
did think that this is very 2025, isn't it? That they do a Frankenstein film, which is meant to be about some kind of grotesque monster of a creature pieced together by lots of different body parts and, you know, the type of person that you would run away from scared, and they choose this generation's Brad Pitt, who is like everybody seems to think is incredibly handsome and amazing. And so even playing Frankenstein and having hours of makeup put on him every day, I could see it still looked like him. I'd read a review that said it's like the hottie Frankenstein.
Wow, interesting. I was interested because he's one of the front runners to be the next James Bond. And that's a big no for me because I think he's too tall because he is flipping massive. And also, he's Australian.
Too tall is rogue.
No, because like
how can you be too tall to play James Bond?
He's like abnormally tall. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not like it's just a 6 foot where you'd be towering a little bit above people.
Bond, you need to be 3 things: tall, dark, and handsome.
No, but not too tall.
And not Australian, apparently.
100% not Australian.
I can vibe with that. I understand.
I hate it when Americans or Australians or whoever else try to do British accents in stuff because it just never sounds any good.
I disagree. Sometimes people do it very well, and you wouldn't even know.
Like who?
Emily Blunt.
She's British.
There's another one.
I was so confused.
Renée Zellweger.
To be fair, I'll give you that one.
Generally, it's the females, and you think, that's really impressive. So, anyway, I didn't know this was coming up, so you're just going to have to trust me. But,
right, there you go. Well, why don't you just give the punters an overview of what this film's about? I know most people know generally what Frankenstein is about, but just give us a quick rundown.
As we normally do, I took the time to write out a nice summary for you, and then I've lost that document. because I didn't save it. So it is partially my fault, which means that just before we started recording, I just typed it into ChatGPT. So I think you're going to see a real reduction in quality of this summary. And I'm just going to read it as it came out, okay? So, the 2025 film Frankenstein reimagines Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, with a richly gothic scope. Ambitious scientist Victor Frankenstein creates a sentient being only to see creation and creature spiral into destruction. Through the creature's perspective, the film examines longing, abandonment, and responsibility, culminating in a frozen Arctic confrontation that rethinks forgiveness over vengeance. That was very wordy from ChatGPT.
That's very, very wordy from ChatGPT, and it's just about a guy creating a monster, really.
Well, yeah.
He likes to embellish, doesn't he? He likes to over-egg stuff. So
I should have done give me the BTEC version, or you know, kind of year 8 secondary school summary. But yeah,
there you go. I mean, I think overall, I didn't really like it. I just thought it was a bit naff. I thought it was a bit boring, and I thought it was a bit too long. And it is 2.5 hours long, but it felt longer than 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I thought it was too long as well. And as I've been reflecting on it, I wonder if watching it on the small screen made it harder to kind of, I don't know, get invested in it, because I felt like the start was quite slow moving, and I found myself being distracted by other things. Obviously, live in a house with other humans, and you've got your phone next to you as well. TV's all the way over the other side of the living room, and I wonder if being in the cinema would have been more immersive and I would have been more drawn in. As it was, it was long and it felt long.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are saying that online, is that this film works really well in a cinema when you are in this dark room and you've got the big speakers and the massive screen. Like, you feel fully immersed into this world, whereas when you're watching it on a TV, it is a lot more difficult. And maybe that's just for all films. Maybe we need to get back to the cinema, man.
And I wonder what the figures are for cinema, because they're still open, but you get the feeling that cinemas aren't quite what they were. And there's also something about choosing a film specifically, that it's a film that you're willing to pay for. Whereas Netflix, obviously you pay monthly subscription, and then you've just got a world of films and you can watch anything and everything. Whereas to choose something specifically out of maybe 6 or 7 that you could watch, you already maybe feel more invested. And I think if it was at the cinema though, I'm not sure I would have chosen it, because it wasn't a film that really grabbed my interest anyway.
But that's the problem, I think, with when you have cinema and streaming, is that you have such a massive choice on streaming that when you look at the list of films on the cinema, you kind of go, oh, there's none of those that really tickle my fancy, so I'll just stay home and watch something on Netflix. Whereas back in the day, before Netflix, you'd go, I really want to go to the cinema and watch a film. You would look at the list and you'd pick something. You just go, oh, that Frankenstein looks the best out of all those kind of films out there, so I'm going to pay for it to go watch it. So I think that, like, psychologically, you're already checked out because you've got all those other options at home.
Yeah. Even renting films, man. We need to bring blockbusters back.
That was good, man. That was good vibes when you go Blockbuster.
I'm quite glad that my older 2 girls still remember very fondly going to Ashton and the Blockbusters there and walking around and then choosing your one film. And then it's just wild though, isn't it? To think that you then have to take it back. Whereas today, it's just a different world. My parents still do that thing where they send a DVD in the post.
Really?
And they get like 3 a month that they can watch and they have to send them back.
What service is that?
I can't remember what it's called. There aren't many left. For a while, in between the kind of going and getting your films and streaming, there was that little in-between phase. A little bit like the mini disc player for music. You know what I mean? It was like all the rage for like 6 weeks.
That's mad, that. So do they pick the films, or is it just random?
Yeah, so you pick them from a list. They send you a list through and you pick what you want and you score it off on a piece of cardboard or something, like on a piece of paper. Then you send it and they send them through the post, and then you have to put it back in this wallet and send it back.
That's mad, that. I didn't know the service like that still existed. There you go. Well, what we'll do is we'll move on to the kind of ratings, so then we can get to some of the nitty-gritty spoilers of this film. Obviously, it's a book. It's a well-known story, so you'll know a lot of the spoilers already, potentially, but we'll get to them so we can talk about it. So if you never watched streams before, you never heard how we rate films, we basically rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. And 1 is, we're saying this is a film that you should not watch as a Christian. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be healthy for your faith. Whereas if it's a 5, this is super safe. This is super great, super Christian friendly. Happy days. So where would you put Frankenstein on this scale of 1 to 5?
I think I'd give it a 2.
Okay, so more on the not so safe side.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I didn't like the surgeon type scenes where he's cutting up dead bodies. I thought that was quite graphic, and I am a little bit squeamish, and so I don't like to watch 24 hours in A&E, let alone some dark gothic butcher film. Maybe that's a little bit harsh. But there was a little bit of nudity, completely unnecessary. Some of the violence from Frankenstein, obviously he's provoked himself, but some of those scenes I thought were quite graphic as well. And so I think I'm right in saying it was a 15, but I reckon it's an old school 18.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I'd give it a 3.
Right in the middle. You're sitting literally on the fence. You have got splinters in your backside.
Well, yeah, because I think it is rated 15, and it's rated 15 because of strong violence and injury detail.
Check.
And it's pretty much everything that you said. And I think I can understand why someone wouldn't want to watch this, because some of the violence is pretty mad. Like, he rips someone's jaw off at one point, which is pretty mental. And when he's building Frankenstein, he is just cutting off legs, and he's just like sawing off a leg, and it looks legit. It looks real. It doesn't look kind of like a dummy leg or a fake leg. It looks like someone's real leg, the way it moves and stuff. So I don't know how they did that, but it was pretty mad. But ultimately, there's no swearing, there's no sex scenes in it and stuff. And so I think just the graphic nature of it, like the butchering of the bodies and stuff, is the reason why it's a 15 and whatnot. And for me, I think I can understand why someone wouldn't mind that or wouldn't be too bothered by that. And especially when he's building Frankenstein, that's a whole 10 minutes that you can just skip. There's no dialogue, there's no kind of like major story plots that's revealed at those times. So it is something you can skip over and kind of miss a lot of it. So that's why I think I'd give it a 3, because I wouldn't recommend it to a child or a teenager, and I wouldn't recommend it to the world and say every Christian should watch this. But ultimately, at the same time, I don't think it's as bad. So what we'll do now is we'll get on to the spoiler section so that we can kind of talk about some of the nitty gritty of this film. And so if you want to go away and watch it and you don't want anything to be spoiled, then feel free to turn off now, because this is your opportunity. I've given you plenty of warning. You can always come back to this at another time. But this film is essentially based off a book. And so I imagine that many people know the general story of what takes place. And I know that you have had this book on your list for a while.
Yes, it is a classic. And I remember picking it up in Waterstones one time and reading the start of it. And I thought, it's got a really good beginning. And I thought, I need to read this. So it's been on my list. But now I don't think I would bother, because I think once you've watched the film, you can never go back and read the original book in the way that you would have, because I've got images in my head now of what Victor looks like, of what Frankenstein looks like, of what the kind of his like crazy laboratory looks like, whereas my mind would have created all of that itself. So I listened to a podcast the other day where they said that Jurassic Park is an incredible book. I wish I hadn't seen the film so I could then read the book. So now I've watched this film, 4 streams, you're welcome. I'm not going to read the book.
But it's interesting, okay, so let's give you a bit of background on the book. So it's written by a lady called Mary Shelley, and she wrote this in 1816, so over 200 years ago, when she was only 18 years old, which is pretty bad, considering how kind of significant it is to the world. It was published when she was 20, so just 2 years after she wrote it, and it was initially published anonymously, and then her name kind of got put to it in later editions and reprints and whatever else. So it's interesting because you're saying that you wouldn't read the book because you've watched this film. And so I did some research to figure out how accurate this film was to the original source material.
You love this. This is becoming your thing, isn't it?
I know, it is.
You watch when you're going to get together with some people from church and watch a film. You're like, guys, just so you know, scene 3, 7.5 minutes in, is not actually part of the original book. So there.
Is that supposed to be my accent?
No, that was somebody who's like really knowledgeable. That wasn't me doing an impression of you.
So I'm not knowledgeable. Yeah, you're digging these holes now.
Compared to ChatGPT, you're struggling.
Yeah.
Let's just
Well,
say.
ChatGPT's silly anyway. Basically read an article online from a Mary Shelley expert to talk about how it differs from the book. And so she said, generally speaking, so this is kind of an overall thing, even though it reinvents a bunch of stuff, it really captures the heart of the book. And so if you watch the film, you've got a general idea of what the book is supposed to be communicating. But a lot of things were shifted and changed for this film. And so essentially Victor's whole backstory is completely changed. So within the film, Victor grows up in a very wealthy family, and his dad is like the biggest and the best doctor in the world. And in the book, that's just not the case at all.
Interesting.
So Christoph Waltz's character in this film, he's a wealthy businessman. He profits from war and he funds Victor's work and basically just gives him a blank check and says, do what you need to do. I will fund absolutely everything for you. And it's kind of seemingly he does this because he wants fame and he wants to advance science and kind of have his name known as kind of bringing life from death and all this type of stuff. But we find out actually the reason he wants to fund this work is because he's dying and he's very sick and he wants Victor to figure out a way to prolong life and bring life back from death and so on and so forth, so then it can be given to him. But ultimately, he's a completely made-up character, apparently. He's not in the book at all, which is quite interesting because he's a real key figure within this film. And then you have Elizabeth, who is the love interest of Victor's younger brother, and he's also the niece to Christoph Waltz's character. Obviously, Christoph Waltz isn't a real character within the book, and so ultimately Elizabeth can't be related to him. In fact, in the book, she is a childhood friend of Victor, and she becomes Victor's fiancée. And in the film as well, she talks to the monster a bit and kind of interacts with him. But in reality, in the book, she never meets the monster until the monster kills her on her wedding night to Victor.
That is wild. That is very different, isn't it? Because the way the film is set up is Victor is clearly the villain, whereas Frankenstein, in many ways, is the good guy, is the kind of the hero. But that wouldn't have happened if Elizabeth had been killed by Frankenstein. So obviously she does die, but it's not at his hand, is it? And so it's interesting that they've changed that because you'd have a very different view of Frankenstein, I think.
100%. And really, within the book, apparently she's quite passive. So she doesn't do a huge amount or doesn't say a huge amount. But here in the movie, she kind of plays other side of the coin to Victor in the sense that Victor is quite harsh and he abandons the creature. He whips the creature at certain points and stuff. Whereas she's very kind and nurturing and wants to give the creature a name and stuff like that to kind of actually treat it with value and humanity. And so it's interesting that they've taken the character from the book who's quite passive and made her almost like the moral anchor of the film, which I thought was quite interesting.
But even saying that, her role wasn't particularly long. And that's the thing, is that the film felt long, but there were also certain characters that didn't seem to be developed. And I thought she was someone that she needed more, really. And there's a scene where she goes into a confessional booth with Victor. And it's quite a funny scene. And that's really the only bit of kind of light relief in the film. Whereas you could have done that more. When I think of Frankenstein, I think of like TV programs and cartoons as a kid, where you had Frankenstein, with kind of bolts coming out of his neck. And it was normally more of a comedy role. And so I wasn't fully sure what to expect with this, but it was just very dark. And even those moments of light were very minimal, but at the same time, feeling very long.
That follows on nicely to one of the ideas that I really kind of pulled out of it, which was the idea of kind of judgment and perception. Because essentially within the book, and I think it's kind of seen here, but mostly really in the book, the creature is supposed to be this kind of huge, terrifying creature made from all these undead kind of body parts, and he's meant to look horrible and disgusting and evil, but the whole heart of the book and the film is that he actually isn't that. So essentially the creature suffers a lot because of appearance, not innate wickedness and being horrible and whatever else. And you see this within the film. The creature only really attacks others and kills other people when he's first provoked. So we see this when he escapes from the tower. He goes into the woods and he's feeding some deer. And you kind of see this endearing moment where he's learning what it means to be alive and kind of like engaging with this new life he's been given. And then all of a sudden he just gets shot by some hunters. And it becomes like a whole thing. And ultimately what's happening is the creature is portrayed as this kind of good person innately who is being persecuted because of the way that he looks. And Mary kind of Shelley wrote this as a commentary on life in like 19th century kind of England, because often people were included or excluded based upon how they looked, based upon how they dressed, based upon what class they came from, what their family name was, and all these other different factors. That it wasn't the character of the person, or it wasn't who that person is, or how they engage in life in the community. It was more, what family do you belong to? How much money do you have? Those types of things. And I think it's often when it comes to the church, and I found this quite interesting, was how often do we make assumptions on people based on how they look or in how they speak, or in how they dress, or whatever it may be. And it really made me think of that verse in 1 Samuel 16, where it says, man sees the outer appearance, but God sees the heart. So that we as humans only get a one-dimensional view of who somebody is and what someone's about. But we often judge people and treat them a certain way or behave around them in a certain way based off that one-dimensional view. And it made me think of when I was a teenager. There was a time where a homeless man was coming to the Sunday meeting for a couple of weeks, and classic homeless guy, he's dirty, doesn't smell very great, he's got kind of a big shaggy hair and beard and whatever else, and beat up clothes and whatnot. And he would often sit at the back of the room, and people wouldn't really sit near him, and one of the kind of the guys would go and sit kind of close to him just in case something happens. And in our meetings, we allow contributions, so you can come to the front and you can contribute, whatever that may be. You want to sing a song, say something, read a Bible verse, whatever. And he started walking up to the front to contribute, and I was sat at the back, and I'm just thinking, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be really bad, because who knows if he's been drinking or whatever it may be. And I made all these judgments about what he was going to say. And he got up and he quoted a psalm perfectly, like without reading it or anything, just kind of off the top of his head. And everyone was kind of shouting and screaming, going, wow, this is amazing. And it really just kind of made me think. And I know that everybody else in the room was thinking the exact same thing as me. It was like, oh, here we go. There has to be a bit of a cleanup job here. But we all judged him based upon how he looked and based upon the fact that he was homeless and whatever else. Not actually getting to know kind of his story and what he's about and how he knew that psalm. He must have had some kind of church background or understanding where is he at with the Lord. Maybe he's just going through a hard time at the moment. We all just said, this guy can't be in because of the way he looks. And it really made me think of Jesus and the way that Jesus lived. Because when you look at the Gospels, you know, Jesus often chose to hang out and help people who were judged, persecuted, looked down on by culture. And then you've got people like the Pharisees, these were the guys, these were the cream of the crop, the most religious, the most holy, the best people to look up to. But Jesus often criticizes them and exposes them for hypocrisy and corruption and so on and so forth. So Jesus didn't care about what people looked like or how they spoke or how they lived. He was willing to help them and willing to engage with them and talk with them and heal them and whatever it may be, because he could see something beyond the one-dimensional view, beyond this outer appearance. And, you know, often we judge people based upon this outward appearance, but ultimately looks can be deceiving, and we should get to know someone and understand who they are, where they're at, and then kind of go from there, really. And you see this within this film, is that ultimately the creature, as you said earlier, he's kind of a bit of a handsome creature. Within the book, he's supposed to be this grotesque thing that ultimately just gets judged because of the way he looks. And in reality, the church does the exact same, and we shouldn't.
As you were talking, I was thinking about that verse in Matthew 23, where Jesus said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup. And the reality is, Jesus says that if you focus on the heart and you, in a sense, clean the heart, then the outward appearance is going to sort itself as well. So we tend not only to judge people on the external, but also because of that, we care too much about what people perceive of us and actually don't deal with the heart matter. And obviously we see from Jesus' ministry, he was the one who favoured the least, the last and the lost. He went to those who were outcasts in society, those who others would turn away from, whether it was the woman who's been bleeding for years, who would have been unclean, whether it's the lepers who would have had to be kind of outside of the camp and declare unclean wherever they went. Jesus touches, Jesus goes near, Jesus brings near those who society would disregard. And I think it's such a good reminder to us, because I feel like every generation has to be reminded of that, because I know what Jesus says, but I still so easily judge the external. And so, yeah, it's a good reminder.
But then, was there anything that you picked up on from this film?
I think two things for me. I think a major theme in the film is life and death. Victor, because of the death of his mother in childbirth, seems to have this plan first to be a better surgeon than his dad, but more than that, in a sense, wants to defeat death, wants to find a way to prolong life, to resurrect life, and so nobody ultimately needs to die. Unfortunately, even though he creates a monster who seemingly is immortal, can't be killed, everybody else around him, all his loved ones, die. And so he fails in that kind of aim to preserve life. In fact, he really is responsible for the death of his brother, the death of Elizabeth, death of Elizabeth's uncle. Everywhere he goes, he brings death. And so, I'm not the first and not the last to notice that really the monster of the film is Victor, not Frankenstein. But that theme of kind of life and death, I just think is so key for us as Christians as well, isn't it? We're in a society where people do almost anything to try and live for as long as they can, whether it's the medicines we take, the diets that we do, the kind of exercise routines we hold up as real heroes, people who are kind of seemingly living a long time. We look at people who've lived into their 80s and 90s and go, wow, that's what we want. So we want to live for as long as we can, but also while we're alive, seemingly ignore the reality of death. And we want to do everything we can to not face up to that reality. And I think we do that in society so much. Whereas as Christians, we know that the one who has defeated death is Jesus. And it's not that he's defeated death in terms of that we won't die, but ultimately those who put their faith and trust in him will live forever with him. And so Christians should be different than our society. And, we want to use the things in society, use things in science that can prolong our lives so we have more time on earth to spread the gospel, see the kingdom come. But at the same time, we can face up to death because we know that this isn't ultimately the end. So I think life and death is a huge theme. And then just the only other thing was forgiveness. That there is this interesting moment near the end of the film where Victor is about to die and he asks forgiveness of Frankenstein and Frankenstein forgives him, which is interesting that he's developed his character, this is Frankenstein, to a point where he would understand what that means. But he does. And again, I was just reminded that it's very easy for us to accept the forgiveness of Jesus for our sins, for how messed up we are, but we find it much harder to forgive others. And that idea of being people who have been forgiven so much, are we ready to forgive others? Again, it's similar to the way Jesus favours the least, the last and the lost. We know it in our heads, but it's easy to not live it out.
Yeah, definitely. And as you can see from what we've just said, this film has a lot of deeper levels to it. And I think when you kind of understand what Mary Shelley was trying to do, that all of this was kind of as a commentary on what life was like in the 1800s. And obviously a lot of that bleeds into what's kind of going on today. And so it's a film that I think is an interesting film. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. It's kind of one of those where you're going to find it too long or too short, or love it, hate it, not for you, or it is right for you. But ultimately there is a lot of deeper levels to it that you can watch and you can enjoy and that you can see. And so I'd be really interested to know, if you end up watching this, if there's anything that you picked up on that maybe we haven't touched on here on streams, or maybe something that we just completely missed. We'd love to hear from you. And so if there is anything that you do pick up on, you can always email us at info@gnba.net. That's info@gnba.net. But unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for this streams. And so if you have enjoyed this episode, please be sure to give us a follow, a like, comment, rating, whatever it is that you're listening to on requires, as it does help get it out there further and helps with the algorithm. And if you do like Marvel, please put it in the comments or whatever it may be, or email us so I can get my free breakfast, hook a brother up. But that's all the time that we have for today. So thanks very much for coming, Tom.
Victor.
Terrible again. But we'll get there. One day you'll do a good impression.
Thanks.
But we'll see you in the next one.